In this tutorial for new Blender users, we'll experiment with some transparency effects on these different objects, and then we'll create a rendering of it and see what it looks like as an animation. Alright, so this is a simple and short lesson. So I have two objects in the scene. You should be familiar with these at this point right now. I've got a material set here. Let's take a look at the blue material. It's just set to this blue color. It has the default value. Specularity makes it shinier like this. You see that there? And I can change the intensity of that right there just by changing the hardness like this a little bit. See how it changes that highlight on there? Of course, you have to be set to texture mode to be able to see that in this case. Alright, so but down here there's this option for transparency. Like here you have to check transparency, and you know by default transparency is set at Z transparency. Alright, that's kind of like the lower grade version of transparency, but when you want to actually render something really nice, you'll need to click the ray trace button and change it there. And this is where you can actually set parameters for, say, materials like glass or all kinds of materials in the world with this index of refraction right here. But we'll leave it at Z transparency for the moment. It doesn't show transparent, but let me kind of intersect it with this object here like this and see if we can make it come to life. And so what you need to do is this alpha value. This is a common term with transparency: red, green, blue, and alpha. Alpha represents how much of it is you can see through. And you notice when I drop the alpha value down, if I go all the way to 0, it just doesn't exist anymore. It's completely see-through. And if you go all the way to 1, it's completely opaque, is what we say. All right. So we have our. We'll just set it down about halfway there, so it's immediately available like that. Well, so let's see what we can do. Let's start at frame 1. We're going to just crank out maybe, I don't know, 150 frames of this animation. So from frame 1, let's actually start it all the way back up here. And at frame 1, we'll go to frame 1 here. Frame 1, I'll set this alpha. Remember from a previous lesson, if not, I'll show you. You hover your mouse over here, and I just press the I key. And by doing that, it turns it yellow, and that indicates that I've just set a keyframe for frame 1 for this particular value of transparency. It's for this alpha value. So then I'm going to go up to, say, frame, I don't know, frame 80 here, and I'll drop the alpha value down to 0, and I'll also press the I key again, and I've set a keyframe, and then maybe back up here at 160, I'll set the alpha value back to 1. And I'll press I, and I've set a keyframe like that. Now let's see if this actually works within the animation mode. Some things do, some things don't. Let's see when it comes back around. We don't need all 250 frames. We'll cut it back down to this. And let's see. And when I'm running, I've run Alt A, or the same as the play button, and you don't see the transparency taking effect. Yet if I move to the keyframes with the up and down arrow key, let's see, you can see that it shows the alpha value is there, but yet I don't actually see it change like this. Alright, so what I need to be able to do, if I, let's see, yep, they're all there. Well, so let's just run an animation and see if it shows up in the renderer. So I'm going to go over here to the render button, and I'm going to make a relatively small render, maybe 720p video, and let's see, I want to come down here, right here, and instead of a PNG file, I'm going to use an AVI codec, just like that. Alright, and then by default it's going to place it in the /TMP directory of your hard drive, and you can set this as the output. And what it's going to do, you have to make sure that if you don't want to overwrite something, what it's going to look at this start frame and this stop frame. So I have it at 162 like that. So if I have another animation that's 162 frames, it's going to overwrite it. But I don't think I do, and if I do, oh well. It wouldn't be anything of great loss. Alright, so I have these set here, so I'll click the animation button. Let's just see how fast it takes to render this. So, well, there's a problem there already. So I see that it's frame 6, frame 7, but well, we'll let it run anyway because we're close enough. I didn't set the camera, but we'll just see if the transparency is actually taking place. That's frame 17, 18. So theoretically, by the time we get to frame 80, we should start seeing that cube through that cone, and it looks like it's starting to take place. Yep, frame 39. Yeah, transparency effects definitely take some time. Frame 50. Well, so you see it's actually working, but you also see that, well, it's actually a reasonable version of transparency, but it's not completely accurate unless it was ray traced. So, and then you see it's going completely transparent, almost at frame 80. Well, so we'll stop it there. That kind of gives you an idea that it actually does work, and I think you can figure out how to set your own from there. But let's just take another look at it from a different perspective. Let's go back to the material button and make it ray trace transparency. Just use the default values, and let's run it again and see what happens. Animation. I'll zoom in like this. Well, we see it's a little bit slow. It's running at about yeah, not quite 2 seconds per frame, but still, I'm up to frame 13. We'll let it run, and one other thing, we'll try it with the cycles renderer, because I'm just using Blender Render right now. You know, you can use Blender Render for a lot of things still. And cycles takes care of a lot of your lighting a lot better. However, I can show you in another tutorial that just by placing a lot of point lights all over your scene and having a lot of them, you can resolve a lot of the darkened areas that you might create in shadows on typical Blender Render. You can still make your scene look really, really nice. So if you don't have a card with a lot of GPU cores, then it doesn't matter, because Cycles takes advantage of all those GPUs. Well, so it's working there. I guess to really see it better, this would have to have been a really smooth surface, but that kind of gives you an idea. So let's do one more quick test, and let's run it under let's do it under the Cycles render. Let's see if this just by default. I'm not sure by default if it'll actually run if it'll do it correctly. No, not likely, because Cycles uses a different form of lighting in the scene, which I haven't set up. I'm using just the traditional rendering. And let me see how fast this is running. This is sampling. Oh, it's yeah, maybe 5 seconds per frame. But I'd have to set up different lighting. But definitely it gives you a nice, better default rendering if you set that up properly. All right, well, so let's escape that. All right, well, that's all I wanted to show you for this lesson. Just something to have a little fun. And I'll see you in the next lesson.